So earlier in the season, I actually spoke about the Champions League, the Europa League, and the Europa Conference League, and the new format that these competitions are taking. They're all taking a league phase now instead of the old group stage. And I said at the time, I said before this new format kicked off that honestly, I thought it was a good thing overall. It was not perfect. There are some negatives to it, and I will address them in this video. But I also said that I wanted to see how it played out, because whenever I'd seen this format played out in Football Manager, which is the most realistic way of simulating it basically before it actually happened, you know, when I'd seen it with that, and it seemed pretty good. But in theory, this format seemed incredible. Like the drama, the action, more match days, more big games in the Champions League all seemed like positives for fans. So how did it shake up? Well, if you guys have seen my reviews of both the Europa League and the Champions League for their final days, you'll know that I'm a big fan of this new format. I mean, to get the big downside out of the way immediately, it does mean some more games for clubs who are, of course, stretched thin when it comes to fixture congestion and all that bad stuff. Now, that doesn't apply to every single club, really, unless you're going to go very deep into the competition. Instead of 6 match days like they used to be with the old group stage, now are at 8. So every team that gets through to that part of the tournament plays another 2 games. If you've also got the playoffs in there as well, that's another 2 games on top of that. So you're potentially talking about 4 more games for a team to be able to go and win the Champions League. Now, it's unlikely the winner of the Champions League will be in the playoffs, but, well, I say that. I mean, given the teams in the playoffs, I mean, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid and Manchester City, Juventus, all in the Champions League playoffs, and that's what I want to talk about as well. One of the big positives, I think, is the unpredictability. I mean, the Champions League this season has been so incredibly unpredictable. You know, the sides that got through to the top 8, yes, some of them you could see coming. Liverpool, Barcelona. But there were some real big surprises in there at the end of the day. I mean, you had Aston Villa, who, don't get me wrong, these sides absolutely deserve this. You know, there is no luck in this, in my opinion. You know, especially over 8 games, which again, that means that the best teams usually go through. Which you might see that as a negative, really. But I mean the best performing teams. I mean, we had Lille. Lille made it through in the top 8 from France. Brest were up there for a long time as well. They slipped down to the playoffs, but still, them getting into the playoffs is a big deal. Bayer Leverkusen as well. They've been fantastic in the Champions League. Great to see them do so well. You know, some real surprise sides in that top 8, in my opinion. And on top of that as well, I mean, and again in the playoffs, there's some huge clubs. Like, you've got Borussia Dortmund, AC Milan, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, PSG, Manchester City, Juventus. These are teams that in the old format would absolutely walk their groups with barely any exception, but because of the chaos of this new league format, it has meant that some relatively huge teams in the Champions League have struggled. They've really struggled at times. You know, you had some huge surprise results, and yes, these results would sometimes happen, but I feel like it just wouldn't happen as much with the groups. Maybe we're getting a freak season as it's the first season of this. Maybe things will kind of stabilize and normalize a bit as time goes on, but honestly, I doubt it. I really doubt it, because yeah, you've got those 2 extra games as well. You've also got all of the big, and this is the big one for me. So in the old format with the groups, basically you would get 4 pots of seeded teams, same as with this, but the difference is that those seeded teams could not play a team from their pot. So i.e., a team that is drawn as a pot 1 team cannot play another team that is in pot 1. So you won't get the top teams playing each other. You do with this format. You do, and because of that, you do get the big teams slipping up. They get a couple losses against some of their fellow pot 1 teams. They're in trouble. They're in danger, and the pressure's on. And we've seen how tight it was. I mean, look how tight the league is. You've got Bayer Leverkusen in 6th place. They're on 16 points. 3 points separate them and Feyenoord in 19th position. It's absolute chaos, and that final day, it was, you know, topsy-turvy, constantly going all over the shop, and I love it. You would never get that in a group stage because you've only got 4 teams in there. And on the converse side of the pot thing as well, it also meant that pot 4 teams could not play against fellow pot 4 teams, so the worst teams in the Champions League couldn't play against the other worst teams. They do in this format though, and it gives them a chance to do very well. I mean, I don't know who's in pot 4 exactly. I imagine Brest were in pot 4. They've made it through. They're into the playoffs. Club Brugge, they might have been a pot 4 team as well. They're through to the playoffs. Atalanta from Italy, they're doing incredibly well. They just missed out on automatic qualification to the round of 16. They're in place. So was Zagreb as well. Zagreb almost got through. They only went out on goal difference. So honestly, I love it. I think it's way better than it used to be. It's far more unpredictable. The big downside, of course, there's two of them, like I did mention. Fixture congestion. There are more games with this, which is not ideal, but they can do it. These clubs have a lot of players. They can absolutely do it. I don't buy that as an excuse for these guys, at least, to be honest. And the other downside as well on top of that is understanding the format. It's not as easy to understand. Having a massive league, a massive group of 36 teams compared to 8 groups of 4 teams is far harder to understand, and it's a lot harder if you're a supporter of the club to understand where your club stands. But that also means, conversely, on the final day, there are hardly any dead rubbers. There are hardly any games that don't mean anything. I think there were 1 or 2 out of the 18 matches that had nothing riding on them. 2 teams that had already been out of the competition, or already gone through for that matter. Everything was happening. And what helps that as well is the way the draw is too. Again, it is complicated, but it means that even a team like, say, Arsenal, that ended up in 3rd position, and we were 3rd before we kicked a ball on Wednesday night, they still had something to play for. They still had to win, because even though they would still be in the top 8, being further down in the top 8 theoretically means that you get a worse draw, a tougher draw for the round of 16. So every team had something to play for. Even Liverpool, in theory, had something to play for. But those are my thoughts, guys. I think it is far better than what it used to be. And we saw it replicate as well in Thursday night fixtures for the Europa League. Not quite as much drama, really, in my opinion, but at the same time, really, really close. Just because the stakes aren't as high in the Europa League. You know, it's not as prestigious as the Champions League. The teams in there are not quite as big as those in the Champions League on the whole, obviously. You know, there are some giants in there, such as Manchester United, of course. But, you know, in terms of the quality of the teams and stuff, it's nowhere near as good, really. But it's still good. I still love it. I love watching the Europa League and also the Conference League too. And I think this format is much better. I really think it is far, far better than what it used to be. And I think the Europa Conference League should do the same thing too. They've only got 6 games in theirs. I feel like they should go to an 8-game format as well, personally. That's just my take too, because then it just makes it harder as well for the top teams. It makes more unpredictability there than what there is currently, although Chelsea are still going to win it regardless. But anyway, those are my thoughts, guys. What are yours? Let us know in the comments below, as always, and we'll see you very soon for some more football news and opinions just like this, guys. Have a good one. Like, share, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. Have a nice weekend.